In a quiet, sunlit living room, a small girl sat in front of a piano that had been in her family for years. The instrument was old, with worn keys and a few scratches on its polished wood surface. But to her, it was a world waiting to be discovered. From the moment she touched the keys, a soft melody filled the room, delicate yet precise. As if the piano had been waiting for her hands all along, her parents watched in awe, often pausing in their daily tasks just to listen. They had noticed something extraordinary from the start. While other children her age were busy with toys and cartoons, she would sit for hours at the piano, her small fingers moving with a confidence and ease that seemed impossible for someone so young. It wasn't just the speed or accuracy that amazed them. It was the feeling she put into every note, the way she could make the piano speak like a living thing. From the very beginning, it was clear that this was not just a hobby. She didn't play because she had to. She played because she could not help it. The music came from her as naturally as breathing, and every time she played, the house seemed to change. Even the air felt lighter, as if it were vibrating with the sound of her music. Her parents often shared stories with friends and relatives. About her earliest moments with the piano, at just 2 years old, she could recognize songs by ear and repeat them without hesitation. By the time she turned 3, she had begun experimenting, adding her own twists and turns to familiar tunes. Friends would watch, incredulous, as she improvised pieces that seemed far beyond her age, creating harmonies and rhythms that most adults struggled to understand. Neighbors began to take notice too. A knock on the door might come from someone who had heard the faint strains of music and wanted to see the little girl, whose fingers could make the piano sing. When they saw her play, they were often left speechless. Some whispered that it was a gift from birth, something magical that could not be taught. Despite all this attention, the girl remained remarkably grounded. She never seemed to play for anyone but herself, for the joy of the music itself. She would laugh when a note went wrong, sometimes pounding the keys in frustration, and then smile triumphantly when she figured out the right sound. Her parents encouraged her, but they were careful not to pressure her. Knowing that too much expectation could turn her passion into a chore in the small town where they lived, music lessons were common, but teachers were often puzzled when she walked into her room. They expected a beginner, a child who needed guidance. But what they found was someone who already understood concepts that many older students struggled to grasp. Scales, chords, timing, and expression all came naturally to her, and she could switch between them effortlessly. She absorbed every lesson like a sponge, yet she always made the music her own. Adding little details that made it feel alive, it wasn't only her talent that stood out, it was her dedication. Rain or shine, she would be at the piano, practicing quietly while the world went on outside. She didn't complain about long sessions or challenging pieces. Instead, she approached each new challenge with curiosity and determination, often surprising everyone around her with how quickly she could master complex songs. Her parents sometimes worried she was pushing herself too hard, but she had a quiet resilience, sense of purpose that guided her. Family meals and conversations often included discussions about music. Her parents would talk about composers and famous pianists, showing her recordings and scores, but she rarely needed instruction to understand the deeper emotions in the music. She could sense the sadness in a minor key or the joy in a bright melody, translating those feelings into her own playing. It was as if she felt the story behind every note. Even when she had never been told the story before, one particular afternoon stood out in her parents' memory. The sun streamed through the windows, casting patterns on the wooden floor. She sat at the piano, her fingers dancing across the keys with a focus that made the room fall silent. She played a piece she had never heard before, improvising a melody that carried both joy and melancholy. Her mother and father watched, hearts swelling, unable to imagine where this talent would take her. It was in moments like these that they realized the world outside their small home would one day need to hear what she could do, even with such talent. The girl remained humble. She would sometimes stop in the middle of a piece, giggling at her own mistakes, and then start again, undeterred. She loved the piano not for the attention it brought, but for the way it allowed her to express herself, to share emotions that words could never capture. Music was her voice, and through it, she could tell stories that no one else could. As she grew, her parents started recording her performances, not to boast, but to preserve memories. Those videos, simple and unpolished, would later become a window for the world to see just how special she was. They captured the innocence of a child, combined with the mastery of a musician. It's a rare combination that few could understand until they witnessed it for themselves. School life was different. Teachers and classmates were often amazed at her skill, yet she remained friendly and playful, refusing to let her talent set her apart in a way that made others feel inferior. She shared her music with friends, sometimes teaching them simple tunes, always patient and encouraging. Her kindness and humility made her beloved, and yet, in the quiet moments alone at the piano, she could reach levels of expression that left even the most experienced listeners in awe. It was during these early years that a clear pattern emerged. Every note she played carried intention and feeling. There was no hurry, no need to show off. Even the simplest melodies became intricate tapestries of sound, each phrase carefully woven with sensitivity and understanding. People began to understand that this was not just talent. This was artistry in its purest form. The girl's journey had just begun, but the foundation was already remarkable. She had the skill, the dedication, and the heart to pursue music in a way that few ever could. And as she continued to explore the world of sound, every day brought new surprises, new melodies, new harmonies, new ways to touch the hearts of those who listened. Her parents often marveled at the paradox of it all. How could someone so small command such enormous presence through music? How could a child bring grown adults to tears with something so delicate yet powerful? They didn't have answers, only the joy of watching her grow, the excitement of imagining what she might accomplish. If given the chance to share her gift beyond the walls of their home, in those quiet, sunlit afternoons, as her tiny hands danced across the worn keys, the girl transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary. Every note was a story, every chord a conversation, and every melody a bridge between her world and the world around her. Friends, family, and neighbors began to see that what they were witnessing was not just talent, but something rare and life-changing. By the time she turned 6, her reputation had started to spread. Local gatherings and small performances revealed her ability to charm and captivate audiences. People whispered about the child who could play with the soul of someone far older, and the news began to travel beyond the neighborhood. It was clear that this young girl, who began with quiet afternoons at the piano in her family home, was destined for something much bigger, even as the recognition grew. She remained the same joyful, curious child. She would laugh at mistakes, experiment with new sounds, and sometimes play just for the sheer fun of it. But beneath the laughter and playfulness was a seriousness about her craft that was remarkable. She understood, even at this young age, that music was more than notes on a page. It was a way to connect, to communicate, and to move people in ways words never could. And so, in that small living room, with sunlight streaming through the windows and the soft echo of piano notes filling the space, a young girl continued to explore her world. She played with heart, with soul, and with a quiet confidence that hinted at the extraordinary journey ahead. From the humble beginnings of home practice and curious neighbors, a prodigy was emerging, a girl whose music had the power to amaze, inspire, and transform everyone who had the privilege of listening as the young girl continued to grow. Her talent became impossible to ignore. The melodies that once filled her living room now reached neighbors and friends who stopped by just to hear her play. Her parents knew that what they had seen in the quiet corners of their home was extraordinary, but the world outside was beginning to realize it too. At school, teachers watched her with curiosity and amazement. While other children struggled to learn simple rhythms, she could play entire songs from memory after hearing them just once. Her classmates would gather around during music lessons, their eyes wide, as her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys. She never played to show off. She played because the music was a part of her, something that expressed feelings she could not yet put into words. Her parents started to look for professional guidance to help her grow. They wanted her to continue enjoying music, while also giving her the tools to refine her skills. The first few teachers were surprised. They expected a typical beginner, but this child already understood concepts that usually take years to learn. Notes, scales, chords, and timing were second nature to her. She could read sheet music quickly, yet she often preferred to play by ear, letting her intuition guide her through melodies. Each lesson became a partnership rather than a one-sided instruction. Teachers found themselves learning from her as much as she learned from them. She added subtle variations, experimented with rhythm, and infused each piece with emotion. Her understanding of music was not technical alone. It was expressive, creative, and deeply connected to her own experiences. Even at such a young age, her parents noticed that music had become her language. She spoke to them through the piano, communicating joy, sadness, excitement, or curiosity with each note. When she was frustrated, her music was sharp and intense. But when she was happy, it flowed like a river, smooth and bright. These expressions allowed her to navigate emotions she could not yet articulate. And they also left everyone around her in awe. Beyond lessons, she began composing her own pieces. At first, they were simple, little tunes, inspired by the sounds around her. The rustling of leaves, the laughter of friends, the distant hum of the city. But soon, her compositions became complex, showing a deep understanding of harmony and rhythm far beyond her years. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and phrasing. Creating music that seemed to tell stories without words, her parents recorded these compositions, keeping every video and audio file, recognizing that something remarkable was unfolding before their eyes. Each recording captured not just talent, but growth, emotion, and personality. Friends who heard her music were often moved to tears, struck by the maturity and feeling that came from someone so young. Performances outside the home began slowly. A local community event invited her to play, unsure what to expect. When she stepped onto the small stage and began, the audience fell silent. They listened as her fingers flew over the keys, producing music that was powerful, sensitive, and unforgettable. At the end, applause erupted, people clapping not just for her skill, but for the emotion she had conveyed. That day marked the start of something bigger than anyone had anticipated. Word spread quickly. Teachers from other schools, music enthusiasts, and even small news outlets began to notice the young pianist who played with such depth. Invitations to perform at local events became more frequent. With each performance, she gained confidence, yet she remained humble and focused. She never sought attention. The joy of playing was enough for her. Her parents had to navigate the balance between nurturing her talent and allowing her to enjoy a normal childhood. There were times when she was tired, frustrated, or overwhelmed. At those moments, they encouraged her to rest, to play simply for fun, or to explore other interests. Despite the attention and opportunities, she remained a child who loved laughter, play, and discovery. She also developed resilience. Traveling to performances, sometimes in unfamiliar towns or in front of large crowds, taught her discipline and courage. She learned to manage nerves, focus on her music, and trust her instincts. Even when mistakes happened, she would continue, turning small errors into opportunities for creativity. This combination of skill, emotion, perseverance made her stand out, not only as a musician, but as a performer. Friends and family often remarked on her ability to connect with audiences. It wasn't just the technical mastery that impressed people. It was how she could communicate feeling, drawing listeners into her world. Children and adults alike felt as though the music spoke directly to them, and many left performances deeply moved, inspired, and sometimes astonished that such depth could come from someone so young. Alongside public recognition, she maintained private moments of exploration. At home, she would spend hours experimenting, trying new techniques, or simply playing by instinct. Sometimes she would sit in silence before the piano, listening to the hum of the room, thinking about how to translate what she felt into sound. These quiet moments were essential, giving her the space to develop her own voice, separate from expectation and performance. Her parents encouraged her curiosity about music in every way. They introduced her to different genres, from classical masterpieces to jazz improvisations. She absorbed it all, analyzing the styles, rhythms, and harmonies, and then incorporating them into her own playing. This wide exposure nurtured versatility and helped her understand music as a universal language that could be expressed in countless ways. The journey was not without challenges. As attention grew, so did expectations. Friends, teachers, and strangers sometimes placed pressure on her to perform perfectly. At times, the weight of these expectations was heavy, and she had to learn how to focus on her own passion rather than external approval. She discovered that mistakes were part of growth, that music was as much about expression as it was about precision. This understanding gave her an edge. She played with freedom, allowing emotion to guide her hands while respecting the structure of the music. The combination of discipline and creativity became her signature, a trait that set her apart in every performance. People who heard her play often commented on the maturity in her music. The feeling that it came from someone much older and wiser than her years suggested. By now, local music communities were beginning to take notice. Invitations to perform at recitals, charity events, and school showcases increased. Each event offered new experiences, larger audiences, more complex pieces, and opportunities to collaborate with other musicians. She embraced these experiences, learning from them while staying true to her own style. The girl's growing reputation also drew media attention. Local newspapers wrote stories about the young pianist who could play with the soul of someone twice her age. Short videos began circulating online, showing glimpses of her performances. People commented on the emotional depth of her music, often expressing surprise and admiration that a child could communicate so profoundly through the piano. Despite this growing fame, she remained focused on the music itself. She didn't seek recognition. She sought understanding, mastery, and joy. Her parents continued to support her, reminding her that while audiences and applause were wonderful, the true reward was in the music and the feelings it conveyed at home. She continued to experiment and compose. Some of her pieces reflected the world around Hertha, laughter of friends, the tranquility of nature, or the excitement of discovering something new. Each composition was a window into her mind and heart, offering listeners a glimpse of how she saw the world. Her music was storytelling without words, painting emotions that could not be described any other way. By age 6, she had already experienced more growth and recognition than many musicians see in decades. She was invited to perform in front of larger audiences, and every performance revealed more about her artistry. People were not only amazed by her technical skill, but also by her ability to connect, to express, and to inspire. Her parents often reflected on how far she had come. From the quiet afternoons at the piano in their living room to the growing attention of audiences and the media, her journey was just beginning. And with each day, she discovered new possibilities. The foundation of talent, dedication, and emotion that had been laid in the home continued to expand, preparing her for opportunities that would soon change her life. While the world started to take notice, she remained a child at heart, curious, playful, and passionate about music, ready to explore the path that lay ahead. Through lessons, performances, and private experimentation, she developed not only as a musician but also as a person. Music taught her patience, focus, and resilience, and in return, she gave the world pieces of her soul through every note. The story of this young pianist was unfolding, one melody at a time, capturing hearts and inspiring those lucky enough to listen. Her talent, dedication, and joy created a ripple effect. Neighbors, friends, teachers, and audiences began to see that what they were witnessing was rare. It was not only skill, but also a profound emotional connection that made her music unforgettable. People began to wonder how far she could go, imagining the stages she might one day play on and the audiences she might touch. Through it all, she remained humble. She never let praise or attention change who she was. She continued to play because she loved it, because music was a part of her, and because each note was a chance to express something meaningful. This balance between extraordinary talent and childlike joy made her story compelling and inspiring. And it was clear that the world had not yet seen the full extent of what she could achieve. And so, as the young girl played in her home, surrounded by the love and support of her family, the world outside began to notice. Her music was no longer just a private joy. It was becoming a message, a gift, and an inspiration. Every performance, every composition, every note she played brought her closer to something bigger. Something that would eventually take as the young girl's reputation continued to grow. Her journey moved beyond the familiar walls of her home. The piano, once a private companion, became her gateway to a wider world. She began performing in small venues, local recitals, and community events. Each new setting presented a challenge, yet also an opportunity to explore her music in ways she had never imagined. Her first few public performances were nerve-wracking. Even though she had practiced countless times at home, the presence of an audience brought new feelings. Her hands would shake slightly at first, and she would take a deep breath before pressing the first key. But as the music began to flow, a quiet confidence would settle over her, and the audience would watch in amazement as a tiny child produced melodies that seemed to carry wisdom far beyond her years. Family and friends would often travel to support her, their presence providing comfort and encouragement. They had seen her talent grow from early mornings of practice and quiet afternoons filled with exploration. They understood the dedication and heart she poured into her music, and they wanted to be there as she shared it with others. Teachers and mentors began to play a more significant role in her journey. They introduced her to new techniques, complex compositions, and styles from different musical traditions. Jazz, classical, and contemporary pieces all became part of her repertoire. Each lesson brought new challenges, yet she met them with curiosity and determination, absorbing knowledge like a sponge and making it her own. Her natural creativity allowed her to interpret each piece uniquely, often adding her own touches that amazed even her instructors. The young pianist also learned the importance of stage presence. Beyond technical skill, she began to understand how to connect with her audience. A smile, a glance, or a subtle gesture could draw listeners into her world. She discovered that music was not only about playing the right notes, but also about communicating emotion and telling a story. Every performance became an opportunity to share a piece of herself. Traveling for performances introduced her to new experiences. She visited different towns, halls, and stages, each with its own atmosphere and audience. But with each performance, she gained confidence and resilience. She learned to adapt, to trust her instincts, and to embrace the unpredictability that came with live music. Her parents guided her carefully through these experiences, ensuring that she remained grounded and emphasized the importance of balance, reminding her to play for the joy of music, not just for praise or attention. They encouraged her to take breaks, explore hobbies, and enjoy moments of childhood alongside her growing musical responsibilities. As word of her talent spread, invitations to perform on larger stages increased. Local radio stations and small television programs began to take notice. People were captivated not only by her skill, but by the emotional depth of her performances. She could make listeners feel joy, sadness, or excitement through her playing, creating a connection that transcended words. In these early stages of public recognition, she maintained a sense of humility. She treated every audience with respect, whether it was a small gathering of neighbors or a room full of strangers. Her approachability and kindness endeared her to those around her, and she often shared simple lessons or encouraged younger students to explore music with curiosity and playfulness. Private practice remained central to her growth. Long hours at the piano allowed her to experiment freely. She would explore new chords, invent melodies, and practice improvisation. These moments of solitude were essential, giving her the space to develop her own voice without pressure or expectation. Each note played alone was a step toward mastery, and each experiment contributed to her growing artistry. One of the most remarkable aspects of her journey was her ability to combine technical skill with emotional expression. She did not simply replicate what she learned from teachers or recordings. She infused every piece with her own interpretation. A simple tune could become a story of wonder. A familiar song could evoke new emotions, and a complex composition could reveal her understanding of musical conversation. This combination of precision and soul made her performances unforgettable. Friends and family often marveled at her dedication. She balanced schoolwork, practice, and performances with a maturity that was rare for her age. Yet, she never lost her sense of wonder and joy. Even after hours of practice, she would laugh, experiment, and explore, finding delight in the sounds she created. Her passion was evident, and it inspired everyone around her. Her growing public presence also brought new lessons about responsibility and professionalism. She learned to prepare meticulously for performances, to respect the space and expectations of others, and to maintain focus under pressure. These experiences taught her resilience and adaptability, skills that would serve her throughout her musical journey as she performed more frequently. She began to attract the attention of professional musicians and mentors beyond her immediate community. Their recognition provided validation but also presented new opportunities for growth. She collaborated with other young musicians, explored ensemble playing, and participated in workshops that challenged her to think creatively and adapt her style. The young pianist also began to develop a sense of her own identity as a musician. She experimented with composing original pieces, blending styles, and exploring personal themes. Each composition was a reflection of her experiences, emotions, and imagination. Through these works, she communicated aspects of herself that were beyond words, connecting with listeners on a deeply human level. Public performances continued to increase in scale and complexity. She played in larger halls with sophisticated acoustics, where every note resonated more powerfully. The audiences grew in number and diversity. Yet she approached each performance with the same focus and passion that had defined her earliest moments at home. Her ability to maintain poise, connect with listeners, and express herself through music set her apart as a performer. Even with growing recognition, she remained a child who loved to explore, learn, and play. Her parents ensured that she had time for friends, games, and everyday adventures. These experiences contributed to her creativity, emotional intelligence, and balance, helping her navigate the pressures of talent and public attention with grace and joy. Through each performance, lesson, and moment of practice, she continued to grow as both a musician and a person. Her journey was not just about mastering the piano, but about discovering herself and the power of music to communicate, inspire, and connect. Each note played, each melody created, and each audience moved contributed to a story that was unfolding one step at a time. Her family watched with pride and awe as she transformed from a child, with a gift, into a young artist capable of touching hearts. They understood the importance of nurturing her talent while preserving her childhood, and they supported her in every decision, guiding her with patience and love. By now, she had performed for audiences who were not only impressed, but also deeply moved. People often commented on the maturity in her music, the way she could convey complex emotions, and the sense of storytelling inherent in her playing. These responses reinforced the understanding that her talent was rare and meaningful, capable of leaving a lasting impression. As she continued to explore her craft, the young pianist began to sense the possibilities that lay ahead. She imagined stages far larger than any she had played on, audiences that spanned cities and countries, and opportunities to share her music with the world. Yet, she approached these dreams with humility and curiosity, focusing on the joy of creation and expression rather than fame or recognition. Her journey was a balance between exploration and discipline, public recognition and private growth, childhood joy and artistic responsibility. Each step brought new experiences, lessons, and challenges, shaping her into a musician and a person of depth, resilience, and empathy. Through it all, her love for the piano remained constant. Each practice session, performance, and composition was a reflection of her passion and dedication. The music was not just an activity, it was an extension of herself, a language through which she could connect with the world. As her reputation expanded, she continued to perform with heart, creativity, and authenticity. Audiences responded not only to her technical skill, but to the sincerity and emotion behind each note. Her journey had moved from a quiet living room to stages across her community, each step building toward a future full of promise and discovery. With every performance, she learned more about herself and the power of music to move people. Understood that talent was just the beginning and that connection, emotion, and passion were what truly made her music resonate. Her story was no longer confined to her home. It was reaching hearts and minds, inspiring others, and leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had the privilege to listen. The young pianist's path was still unfolding, but the foundation had been set. Dedication, creativity, resilience, and joy formed the core of her journey, guiding her as she continued to explore the world of music. The piano remained her companion, her voice, and her bridge to the wider world and through it. She was beginning to understand the true power and beauty of her gift. One day, an unexpected letter arrived at the young pianist's home. It was an invitation to perform on a television show that reached millions of viewers. Her parents looked at the letter with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was a huge opportunity, one that could change everything. But it also meant stepping into a world she had never experienced before. The girl felt a mixture of emotions. Excitement danced with nervousness in her chest. She had performed for audiences before, but never on a stage like this, with cameras, lights, and millions watching from afar. She looked at the piano in their living room, her trusted companion, and knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for without realizing it. Every hour of practice, every note learned, and every composition created had led to this day. Her parents encouraged her gently, reminding her that she had always played with heart, passion, and authenticity. They assured her that the stage, no matter how large, was just another space to share her music. With their support, she began to prepare, not only practicing her pieces, but also imagining the experience of performing for such a vast audience. Rehearsals were intense. She had to adjust to a new piano, the bright lights, and the cameras that recorded every movement. Each day was a lesson in focus, discipline, and confidence. Her instructors guided her carefully, ensuring that she could play with precision while still maintaining the emotional expression that made her performances so compelling. She practiced tirelessly, sometimes repeating the same piece dozens of times, refining each note, each chord, and each transition. Despite the pressure, she remained playful and curious. She experimented with variations in melody, explored different dynamics, and tested subtle shifts in rhythm. These explorations were part of her process, helping her internalize the music and make it her own. She discovered that even in a high-pressure situation, the joy of playing could still shine through. The day of the performance arrived. The stage was bright, the audience large, and the energy in the studio palpable. She felt her heart race as she approached the piano. Her parents stood nearby, offering quiet encouragement, and the team behind the scenes gave supportive nods and smiles. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. From the first note, the room fell silent. The music flowed effortlessly, delicate yet powerful, expressing a depth of feeling that left everyone watching captivated. Her fingers moved with confidence, yet every note carried emotion. The audience, including the host, leaned in, unable to look away. For a few minutes, the stage, the lights, and the cameras disappeared, leaving only the girl and the music. Her performance was a perfect blend of technical skill and emotional storytelling. She played with precision, yet each chord and phrase revealed her personality, her joy, and her sensitivity. People in the audience felt the emotions in the music, responding with expressions of wonder, admiration, and sometimes tears. Even those who had seen many musicians before were astonished at the depth and maturity she displayed. When the last note resonated through the studio, a profound silence lingered for a moment. Then the audience erupted into applause, cheers, and claps, some standing in awe. The host approached, smiling, expressing amazement at the young girl who had just captivated millions. Cameras focused on her face, capturing the joy, pride, and humility she carried despite the incredible moment. After the performance, interviews and media coverage followed. Reporters and journalists wanted to understand the story behind the music. The young girl who played with such emotion and skill, she spoke softly about her love for the piano, the joy of creating music, and the support of her parents and teachers. Her sincerity and honesty made her even more endearing, and the world began to see not just a prodigy, but a young artist with heart and depth. The days following the performance were filled with attention, messages of support, and new opportunities. Invitations to perform at concerts, events, and shows began to pour in. The world was recognizing her talent, and she was beginning to understand that her music could reach far beyond her home, inspiring people and touching lives in ways she had never imagined. Despite the attention, she remained grounded. She continued to practice, explore, and compose, always focusing on the music itself rather than fame. Her parents maintained the balance, ensuring she had time for play, school, and rest. They guided her gently through interviews and appearances, emphasizing the importance of humility, curiosity, and enjoyment in her musical journey. The experience also taught her valuable lessons about professionalism, preparation, and resilience. She learned to adapt to different pianos, acoustics, and audience expectations. She discovered that nerves could be managed, that focus could be maintained under pressure, and that mistakes could be embraced as part of growth. These lessons strengthened her confidence and prepared her for future performances on even larger stages at home. She continued to experiment and compose. Each new piece reflected her experiences, emotions, and imagination. She explored themes of joy, wonder, curiosity, and reflection, translating her thoughts and feelings into melodies that could be shared with others. Her music became a bridge between her inner world and the audience, allowing listeners to connect with her in a deeply personal way. Friends and neighbors who had followed her journey expressed pride and amazement. They saw the transformation from a child playing in a sunlit living room to a young artist performing on a national stage. Her humility, dedication, and authenticity made her story relatable and inspiring, showing that talent combined with heart could create unique, extraordinary moments. The television performance marked a turning point. It opened doors to new opportunities, expanded her audience, and deepened her understanding of herself as a musician. She realized that the world beyond her home was vast, filled with possibilities for growth, collaboration, and inspiration. Yet, she also understood the importance of staying true to herself, playing for joy and embracing the music with authenticity. Her parents continued to support her in every step, offering guidance, encouragement, and love. They understood that the journey was not only about performance, but also about personal growth, resilience, and balance. They ensured she maintained a sense of normalcy, encouraging friendships, play, and exploration alongside her musical pursuits as she reflected on the experience. The young pianist realized the power of music to connect, inspire, and move people. She felt a responsibility to continue sharing her gift, not for recognition alone, but to bring joy and emotion to others. Each performance, each composition, and each audience became a part of her evolving story. The stage, which once seemed intimidating, became a space where she could express herself fully. She learned that confidence came from preparation, practice, and trust in her abilities. She discovered that her music could evoke emotions, create memories, and leave a lasting impact, making each note meaningful and significant. In the days and weeks following her television debut, she continued to grow as an artist and as a child. She balanced schoolwork, practice, performances, and personal exploration, developing discipline, creativity, and emotional intelligence. Her experiences on stage enriched her understanding of music and of herself, shaping her into a young pianist capable of touching hearts and inspiring audiences. The young girl's journey was no longer confined to her home. She had stepped into a larger world, one filled with challenges, opportunities, and possibilities. Yet, she remained grounded, humble, and joyful, guided by her love for music and the support of her family. Each performance became a chance to share a part of herself, to connect with listeners, and to inspire others with her talent and heart. Through it all, she never lost the curiosity and playfulness that had defined her earliest moments at the piano. She continued to explore, experiment, and create, finding delight in the process of making music. Her performances were not just about skill. They were about expression, connection, and the joy of sharing something meaningful. The experience on the television stage was transformative. It taught her the importance of preparation, focus, and emotional expression. It showed her the impact of music on audiences and inspired her to continue growing as a musician and a person. She understood that every note, every melody, and every performance was a step on a journey of discovery, learning, and connection as she returned home from the television experience. She sat at her familiar piano, playing quietly, reflecting on everything she had learned. The music flowed naturally, filled with the same heart and passion that had always defined her playing. She realized that no matter where she performed, the essence of her music came from within, from the joy, curiosity, and emotion that she poured into every note. Her parents watched with pride, understanding that their daughter had taken a significant step in her journey. They saw not only her talent, but also her growth, resilience, and dedication. They knew that this experience would shape her future, opening doors while also teaching valuable lessons about humility, perseverance, and the power of music. And so, the young pianist continued her journey, carrying with her the lessons, experiences, and emotions of her television performance. She remained committed to her craft, curious about the world, and passionate about sharing her music. Each day, each note, and each performance brought her closer to discovering the full potential of her gift, preparing her for the stage's audiences and experiences that awaited in the future. After her incredible television performance, the young pianist's life began to change in ways she could never have imagined. The world outside her small home had become aware of her talent, and opportunities to perform on larger stages started arriving rapidly. Invitations to concerts, charity events, and special appearances came from across the country, and she began to understand that her music had the power to reach and inspire people far beyond her own community, despite the growing attention. She remained grounded and focused on her music. She knew that every note she played carried meaning, and she approached each performance with care and passion. Her parents continued to support her, emphasizing the importance of balance and joy. They reminded her that while recognition was rewarding, the heart of her music lay in the expression of emotion and the connection she made with her audience as she traveled to perform in new venues. She encountered different kinds of audiences. Some were familiar with her story, while others were hearing her play for the first time. Regardless of the setting, she remained calm and composed, allowing the music to speak for her. She discovered that her ability to convey emotion through the piano created a unique bond with listeners, one that transcended words and connected hearts. Each performance taught her something new. She learned to read the mood of the audience, to adapt her expression, and to trust her instincts. Sometimes the audience responded with tears, laughter, or applause. At other times, the silence that followed her final note was filled with awe and reflection. She began to understand that her music could influence emotions in subtle but profound ways. Her compositions also continued to evolve. Inspired by her experiences on the road and the people she met, she began to write original pieces that reflected her journey. Some were joyful, celebrating the beauty of life and discovery. Others were introspective, exploring feelings of wonder, curiosity, and even nervousness before a big performance. Each composition revealed her growth as both a musician and a human being, giving her audience a window into her heart. She also began to collaborate with other musicians, learning from their styles and incorporating new techniques into her own performances. These collaborations helped her understand the importance of listening, adjusting, and working together to create something beautiful. She discovered that music could be both personal and shared, a way to communicate not only her feelings, but also to respond to others in harmony. Throughout this journey, despite her fame and growing skills, she never lost the joy that had drawn her to the piano as a small child. She laughed at mistakes, experimented with new sounds, and delighted in discovering unexpected melodies. This sense of wonder and exploration became a defining aspect of her artistry, reminding audiences that her music was not just technically impressive, but deeply human and alive. Her parents continued to guide her carefully, making sure she maintained a sense of normalcy. They encouraged friendships, playtime, and school, ensuring she remained connected to the everyday experiences of childhood. This balance allowed her to grow not just as a musician, but as a person, grounded in love, curiosity, and resilience. Media attention grew as well. Interviews, articles, and features highlighted her talent and her story. People were fascinated by the child who could play with such emotional depth and technical skill. Yet, she approached these moments with humility, always redirecting attention to her music rather than herself. She understood that the story of her journey was not just about talent, but about dedication, passion, and the joy of sharing something meaningful.